I did want to build this company, and I knew that it wasn't possible if I went on. So I was like, you know what? For once, I'm going to put my dreams above my comfort zone. And so I went way out of my comfort zone, and I said, alcohol needs to be out of it until you build a company. I literally made that promise to myself. And then 30 days turned into 60, and then it's been 3 years. And then the third thing is just having that accountability, knowing that if you went back to your old way, you'd be letting down a lot of people.
Welcome, Sydney Eason.
Hi, it's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, I am so glad to have you here. We're going to have a really nice conversation. And Sydney, you mentioned always wanting to run your own company. So what inspired that dream, and what were some of the early steps you took to make that a reality?
I think ever since I was little, my favorite book as a child was I'll Do It My Way and I'm a Girl Boss. And I think ever since, and I've been reading those since I was like 6 years old. My mom would read them. And I watched my mom kind of run companies and always be in charge and be able to kind of do what she wanted. And so as I got older, I wanted to be just like my mom. And so that, led me to wanting to work with her, but she had a strong rule that no one would work with her, including my brother or I, until we were at least 30 and had worked other jobs and kind of learned what other companies were like, how they operated. So when I came to be about 30, I was still working at a PR agency, and actually, I think it was right before COVID, I left the company. It had nothing to do with COVID, but then COVID hit and I moved home, and my mom and me kind of were talking about what are my next steps. I was helping her out with her company. She was working at Manchester Hospitality Group, so I was helping out a little bit there. But I was kind of like, what are my next steps that I want to do? And we kind of sat around and talked, and she had so much experience and I kind of always wanted to start her own company, and I'd always wanted to be my own boss. So we kind of just came together and said, I think now is the time. I know some people are like, you started a hospitality company in the middle of COVID. That is not the best time, but it actually gave us time to get organized and kind of figure out what we wanted to be and what our name was. We went through a few name changes. So it kind of, took a little bit of time, but I think leaving that job was my first big, what do I want to do next with my life? And so I thought back to what I always wanted to do, and that was run a company. So why not now?
Wow, that's very inspiring. I love that this dream really started with the seeds of the books. They sound like really fun books. I may have to share those with my daughter. And I love that your mom had that boundary of you have to work for other companies, you have to be 30. And then that mindset of let's start something, even though people might think that you didn't use the word crazy, but I'll use that word for lack of a better one. It's
okay to use it. It was kind of a little crazy that we did it during COVID.
Yeah, but that's what you hear about successful people, right? Is that they do something outside of the norm that might be perceived as crazy. So
exactly.
Yeah, that's really cool. So can you share more about the process of launching Eason Branding and some of the challenges you faced in those early days?
Sure. So I'm very lucky that my mom is, one would call OCD, I would call her type A. She's very, very organized, and she follows all the rules to a T, and I'm like the creative, go do what I want. So I was very lucky to have someone who understood LLCs. They understood there was actually a legal process, because I was just like, let's start a company and go and get clients. And she was like, there are processes in place. So she kind of went out, started the LLC, got all the paperwork together as I started, working with designers, figuring out what our branding, because I majored in graphic design, but it's always hard to create your own brand because you have visions, but it's never going to be good enough for you. So it was easier to go out to friends who my mother and I had known through the working with them. So we kind of just decided what I wanted our brand to be. Our first company was called 30 Main. It evolved into Eason Branding as We moved, 30 Main was because we worked with a lot of small hotels that were a big part of small towns, Main Street. But as we started to go into a lot more different types of hotels, we decided, to broaden the name and, use our last name. So that came along. And then I decided to move back to New York. My parents moved to Baltimore. My mom is constantly moving, and you'd think that I was an army brat, but it's just she worked in tourism her whole life and, liked to move around. So I moved back to New York, but we kept the company going. Even though I had a side job managing a restaurant, we kept on going after clients, really figuring out what we wanted that company to look like and what our ideal clients were. Luckily, some of our clients that we'd had with Main Street kind of transferred over to us. And so we had amazing clients. We had an amazing client in Agunquit, Maine called the Dunes until they were bought out, but fabulous client. And we had a few other small clients, and we're still growing now, but we started off with small boutique hotels because that's where we noticed there was a huge gap where a small hotel cannot afford a huge agency. And I'd worked at huge agencies. I'd seen those retainers. Like, you can't ask a 20-room hotel to pay you 15 grand a month for social media. They can't do it. So we decided, let's go after places that we know could use our help at a smaller budget that is still reasonable, but we didn't have overhead because it's always just been me and my mom, and then we hire people as projects are fit. So we never had to cover that overhead cost. So we've built up an amazing freelance network. So we've always been just me and her with an amazing freelance network. So we don't have any overhang, which allows us to, be able to price a lot lower than big companies.
Great. That is a wonderful model. So you mentioned Dune was a fabulous client.
Yes.
So what makes a client fabulous for Eason Branding?
I would say the GM of that hotel is an amazing person. We're still friends with her till this day. She still calls us whenever she has miscellaneous questions. She's still there. And they were receptive to our ideas. They didn't tell us what to do. They let us kind of tell them what we thought was the best thing to do. And I think that made such a difference because we were actually allowed to follow a strategy that we had built out. And a lot of clients will tell you what they think the strategy is, and you'll have to follow it, but it's not going to work. With them, they said, we hired you, you're the experts, here's a few things we would like to do, but you tell us how it can be done. And so I think, from that to we had amazing photographers come in. I mean, it was an easy sell. It's a bunch of cottages on a dune right across from the beach. It's like heaven on earth. It's still my happy place. I still go up there. The GM and I are so close. So I think it's just people who actually let you do your strategy and, contribute and help where they can, but they don't tell you what the best thing to do is.
Right. Yeah, I love that the GM acknowledge that they're hiring you, you're the expert, and let you be the expert.
Yes.
Wonderful. So you spoke about the importance of building relationships with clients. Clearly, you're close to that GM. And
Yes.
So can you expand on that philosophy and why it's so core to how you and Eason Branding work?
Definitely. So since I was a young kid, I went to work with my mom, like every time I was sick or there was vacation. And one thing I always noticed is she was always very close with her clients. Like her clients would call her for anything. She had boundaries, but, she always had a really good relationship. And so when we went into our company, she made it very clear to me, we're in the business of building relationships, not just making money. And I think that's always stuck with me where when we have a client, it's just important to build a relationship, have them trust you, give them good work, but really be able to bounce ideas back and forth and really have that relationship and that trust. And I think a lot of times people miss the whole relationship. They're just out there and they look at, okay, this is just another paycheck each month, and they kind of missed that whole idea of these people are human too. We're working with other humans, and they might have ideas. Maybe they're not marketing experts, but that doesn't mean that they don't have ideas. So I always want people to feel safe coming to us and feeling like they can rely on us. And that goes beyond just doing your social media posts or doing your brand. I've had GMs call about just like random questions of like, we're getting new bedding. What do you think of this? And you're like, that is not a marketing person's job, but they've trusted us so much that they want us in on every aspect. And I think that's when you really know you've built something special.
Wonderful. So, can you tell us more about the mocktail recipe book you're working on with Joe?
Of course, it is. It's very exciting. I worked with Joe Germanato for 9 years in every asset, marketing, managing his restaurant, making his mocktail program. It was a wild ride, but wouldn't change it for anything. And me and him became very close. We both got sober around the same time. Well, he beat me by 9 months, and he'll always remind me of that. Because he kind of inspired me. When I saw he could do it, I said, if he can do it, I got to find a way to do it. And he gave me a lot of grace during that period. And that is something I never forgot. So when I got sober, I said, we're both sober sitting around at this bar and we're sipping on seltzer water all day long. And there's got to be more to this. And so I went and worked at the first sober bar in New York City while still working for him, called Hecate. And I learned how many really cool products were out there that were non-alcoholic. And after, working 3 jobs at the same time, one had to give. So I left Hecate but stayed at Joanne Trattoria, and I said, let's make a non-alcoholic program because it's so important to us. And then from there, I spent, I want to say, 2 years developing recipe after recipe, and they changed every season, but I held on to them all. And he finally was like, we got to do something with this. And so his story is so inspiring about, his daughter is Lady Gaga, but also his sobriety story is very interesting. And he had a lot to share with people. So the mocktail book is kind of a story. It has recipes of great mocktails that I've created. It's also kind of a story of his sobriety journey, plus how all of the people in the restaurant helped into that sobriety journey. There's also part of my sobriety journey in there. And I think it's just a great book for, whether you want to get sober or you're just like, hey, I need to slow the brakes on my drinking. And it's so you get some great mocktails, you get some great inspiration, you get to see how people are really what help you along the journey. And I think that's something I see in every aspect of my life is like, if it's not for the people in your life and the value they add, you really have nothing. So from sobriety to making this book, even to Eason Branding, like, as you said before, relationships are key. And I think that was something we wanted to share with the world, is that having the right relationships can really help you. So it's an exciting book. It comes out, I want to say, in October. We've gone back and forth because, we want to tell the story just right. And then the recipes, I'm OCD, so I've been, changing them every 5 minutes. And finally I had to say, I'm done. I've made enough of them. We're working with a lot of really cool brands that are like, mocktail brand, non-alcoholic spirit brands. So I got to, get great relationships with them in the process, which it's been just a cool journey all along to build relationships with that and, share my love of mocktails, and 2 years of creating them. For every single season, holiday, or reason, we did something, even down to Kentucky Derby Day, Pride Month, everything.
Very cool. Well, that sounds like a very interesting journey. And I love that you have a recipe book as a byproduct of your experience as well as Joe's experience. And so the book is called, what is the book called?
I have to look up the exact, because we've gone back and forth on the title about 35 times, but it is a long, I will have to look it up and let you know later, because we've changed it like 4 times, but it is along the lines of gaining a second wind in life, because me and him both said that it's kind of like our second wind. Like we had the phase of our life where we were drinking and a little bit out of control, but we got this chance at doing it over again. And it's kind of cool because no matter what age, I think having a second wind is kind of cool. So I was like, at 30, you don't really have a second wind. That's like for when you're older. But now it's cool that, he's talking about his second wind at 65, and I'm talking about my second wind at 30. But I think it's, we all have that part in our life. So it's along the lines of finding your second wind with mocktails. And I love it. Even at the restaurant to this day, we have a sign that says, "Make me a mocktail." So anyone who walks in is comfortable knowing that we have a non-alcoholic section on the menu. And I think that's a big part of it is, people don't feel weird saying, "Do you have anything non-alcoholic?" Because it's right in your face.
I love that you're making it friendly and inviting to ask for a mocktail. And so you've noticed that there's a trend towards
Yes.
this mocktail fad, as well as just non-alcoholic drinks in general. So can you speak to that?
Definitely. I think what happened was a lot of people stopped being as interested in alcohol, especially in the new generation. They're kind of like doing their own thing. They're not as into alcohol. So I think a lot of restaurants and bars thought, oh, this is just a trend. Everyone's on this health kick. It's going to be done in a year. But now it's like 4 years later, and I don't think it's going anywhere. I think people are very interested in health-wise. You have a younger generation who is way more interested in their health and, their wellness. And I think that is really moving it, where if you are a restaurant or a bar or even like a hotel welcoming people and you don't have non-alcoholic options, you're really missing the mark. Because even if I go in and you only have Heineken Zero, but I ask your bartender, "Can you make me a mocktail?" and they say, "Of course," that community feels heard and understood. And there's nothing worse than when I go in and you ask someone and they kind of roll their eyes, or they don't roll their eyes, but they're kind of like, "Why is this person coming to a bar?" And it's like, well, all my friends wanted to come here, so I'm out. We're celebrating someone's birthday. I'd love to be able to have a non-alcoholic beer or like a non-alcoholic champagne just to be able to be part of it. And I think a lot of restaurants are really trying now, but you still sadly see a lot not. And I think we got to catch up with the rest of the world. It was wild. I went to London 2 years ago now, and you couldn't even go into a small pub, and they were even like, "Oh, we have Guinness Zero, we have Heineken Zero," and I was like, "You're like a random pub in the back of the wall where like people are like sleeping on the benches at night, but yet you still cater to this community." So I think we have a lot of work to do to catch up, but it is positive to see more and more places having at least a few mocktails on the menu or a few non-alcoholic beers. So I feel like we're getting there. We're not there yet, but we're slowly getting there.
Okay. And speaking to the recipes in your book, you made those special so that the average person could use that recipe book.
Yes. Not to insult a lot of great books. I have a million people I've met who have made amazing mocktail books, but a lot of their recipes are like, you need to have juniper berries and dried oranges from Peru, and you're like, I'm not gonna go buy all this. It's kind of like when you get a recipe and there's 40 ingredients that you buy, and then you look at them in the next year when you're cooking for Thanksgiving and looking through spices, and you realize you've got all these weird things you're never going to use again. So I wanted to make it so you could buy 6 or 7 ingredients, make 3 or 4 mocktails out of that, but they're also things that you'll use again in your house. They're not weird ingredients that you have to have specialty for this. Like lime juice and lemon juice and stuff like that. You're going to use that, or you can find ways to use that in more than just this one recipe. So I tried to make it a lot more accessible to the normal crowd, where, you can buy 7 ingredients and maybe make 3 mocktails instead of having to buy 12 ingredients to make one drink at your house.
Mm-hmm. I love that. That's a wonderful attribute to your recipe book that's coming out possibly in October this year. So what motivated you to start writing about the non-alcoholic drinks in your blog. So you have your blog, The Alchemist with a Twist. And how has that
Yes.
evolved over time?
So when I got home, I recently moved back to Virginia and I was bored, not gonna lie. I was like, oh my goodness, I've moved home. I'm from New York City, so that you can't get bored in New York City. This is the first time I've been bored in 12 years. Like, I don't know what to do. And so I said, you know what, I'm going to start a blog. And it was interesting because it kind of evolved into not just being about non-alcoholic, but also being about the low ABV movement. Because, I came home and my mom was like, I love wine, but I want to cut down. But like, it's my ritual every night to come home. And I was like, well, you don't have to change your ritual, but they make low ABV wine. And she's like, what is that? And I was like, okay. So I realized that I am very tied into the community. I read about it a lot. I know a lot about it. So I kind of just assumed everyone did. And then I started going out with my brother's friends because he lives in Richmond, and they were all like, you are full of knowledge that like we would never know. Some of them are pregnant. And I was like, have you been to this non-alcoholic store? Like, have you had these mocktails? It turned out that like my brother's best friend had a New Year's Eve party, and I made all of the mocktails that night, like bartended, because they had a bunch of friends who came and weren't drinking. And at that point, I was like, you know what? I have spent so long studying this industry that maybe I can help out people who aren't as educated in it. And I kind of took the angle of educating people about it and also taking a little bit of a hospitality angle. So, like, letting restaurants know you can make more money with these and how to incorporate these, and tying it into hotels and how hotel menus should have this. So I kind of tied in a little bit of Eason Branding, a little bit of Alchemist with a twist, tied it all together. And I got very into it. And then have been focusing a lot on Eason Branding, but I'm about to dive back into writing a lot more on Alchemist with a twist. So you'll see a lot more articles in the next few weeks. But I think it was just, I wanted to educate people because I think there's a lot to learn. And I think a lot of people just talk about non-alcoholic, but no one you really hear talks about low ABV. And some people want to cut back. So I kind of wanted to be someone for rather you're sober, you're just curious about not drinking, or you just want to cut back on drinking. I kind of wanted to be for everyone and not just for if you're not drinking at all, here's something for you. Because some people aren't looking to get sober. They're just looking to cut back a little bit or not drink Monday through Thursday. And I wanted to have options for that as well.
Wonderful. It sounds like a valuable blog, and I look forward to reading your new writings on there. So, how has your own personal journey with reducing alcohol consumption influenced your passion for this space?
So, I got sober a little over 3 years ago, and I'm not going to lie, it was a lot of I was very reluctant. I had tried before, it hadn't worked, but my best friend at the time was like, listen, you've got to fix something because you have a lot of potential, but your drinking is getting in the way of a lot of your life. And he was a big part of my life. He knew of my goals of building my own company. He knew all of that. And he was like, you're not going to reach those if you continue down the way you're drinking. And, I finally listened. I thank that friend every day because I know that was not an easy conversation to have because people have lost friends over telling them, you have a problem. But I decided to one day listen. And I think, I luckily had not gone so far down that I didn't have a support system with friends and family. And so I had them to kind of hold me up. But one thing is, I loved the taste of alcohol. It wasn't just for me about, getting drunk. I loved the ritual. I loved going to bars. All my friends say I still probably know the best dive bars in New York City to go to 3 years sober because I just like those environments. But I wanted those environments to be inclusive because, I don't expect my friends to throw a birthday party at a place that only has, sober options. That's just not reasonable. I chose to stop drinking. They didn't. And so I think it became very important to me to create a space, which is why I created Joanne's with non-alcoholic, and then to start, educating people about the importance of non-alcoholic so that more and more places will have these options so that when you want to go and celebrate with your friends, you have those options. And I think that's very important to me because a lot of alcohol is a ritual. And I don't think people realize that. It's not always about, oh, I want to go get drunk. It's like, I want to toast my friend at their wedding, or I want to, go out for happy hour after work, or, it's tied into a lot of occasions, and it sucks when you feel left out of those. And you're like, let me cheers with my seltzer water in the corner. It doesn't really feel celebratory. And so I think I just want more and more people to be educated on it and the importance of it and how it can actually benefit your bar or restaurant or hotel or whatever. If there's a lot of great pop-ups coming up in New York that are like sober bars. There's one I think opening up in the fall that's another like sober private club. I'd have to look up the name again. And I think it is great that there are spaces where people are going to feel safe in, but I also want there to be, you don't have to go to a sober place to feel safe. I'd love for you to be able to go into a regular bar and have those options as well.
And so you spoke about having a support system and how important, I mean, it sounded like it was important, but what part did having a support system in your transition from drinking to becoming sober, how did that play a part in your life and your transition?
I think three big things. I think one, knowing people believed in me when I kind of felt like I was a failure and I was just a drunk and I was a mess, and having those people who were like, listen, you're none of those things. You've made a few mistakes, but you have a lot to give the world and you're not so far gone that you can't repair yourself. And I think I had my roommate at the time, I'll give her a shout out, Lorelai, was never left my side through the whole thing. And she was always like, girl, you're going to build a company. You're going to be successful. You're going to do everything. And I think having her and my other best friend, Michael, really believe in me and my family. When you don't believe in yourself, it's very easy to get down on yourself. And I think just knowing that they believed in my dream. And then I did want to build this company, and I knew that it wasn't possible if I went on. So I was like, you know what? For once, I'm going to put my dreams above my comfort zone. And so I went way out of my comfort zone, and I said, alcohol needs to be out of it until you build a company. I literally made that promise to myself. And then 30 days turned into 60, and then it's been 3 years. And then the third thing is just having that accountability, knowing that if you went back to your old way, you'd be letting down a lot of people. And it's not that, they care if I bought wine for a bar for 5 years. It's not that taking a sip that they mind. It's, we don't want you going and sitting at a bar by yourself, ordering 3 beers and like trying to erase what's going on. And I know that if I did that at this point, I would let a lot of people down. I would feel bad about myself. And also it's not in my trajectory of, it's not going to help me make my company better or reach my dreams. And I just think that for me, there's so much more to lose than there is to gain. And I think those three things have really helped keep me on the path of reminding myself every day that, there's bigger things than alcohol.
Mm-hmm. And so what kind of mindset work have you done to help you move out of your comfort zone, keep your dream in the forefront of your mind to motivate you to stay on the right track?
Oh gosh, I've done so much stuff. Lots of therapy. Shout out to therapy. My therapist is a dream. I think she was with me when I was drinking and has been with me since and is phenomenal. A lot of meditation actually in the last few months. I think journaling has helped, and I think having honest conversations and making goals and benchmarks that I have to meet for my company with my mom, and if I don't meet those, I'm letting down my business partner. And so I think lots of guidelines, lots of journaling, lots of goals and benchmarks of, and I'm ADHD, so I'm obsessed with organization scheduling. So like every morning, it's like my day is scheduled like 6 a.m., 6:15, down to like brush your teeth. And my mom's like, you're going to forget to do that. And I'm like, no, I just need to have it scheduled in my day so I know. So I think, having a structure, having, and a lot of like working out for myself, not for anyone else, but just to stay in that clear mind frame. I think a lot of journaling, I finally, woke up and just I wrote down everything that was going through my brain, even if it was stupid or it didn't make sense. And I used to be like such a perfectionist. I'd be like, my journal even needs to be perfect. Like, I mean, buying color coded pens, writing certain things in certain colors. And I was like, no one's seeing this but me. Why do I care? Um, so I think really trying to understand myself and where, I still need help. No one's perfect on this journey. So I now know when to ask for help, which was something that I wasn't very good at for most of my life. I was a very big, I think my first words were, I can do it myself. And it's always been like that. So it's, been a journey to ask for help along the way, but getting inspiration and help from other people, I've learned, actually helps further your career. Trying to do everything yourself actually holds you back.
I love that you said that. Yeah. And as a transformational coach, a lot of what you're touching on between having the partners in believing, the accountability, journaling, meditating, all of those are intricate parts to transformation. So clearly you were able to take your old version and transform it into your new successful, refreshed self. So bravo to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So when you made the decision to leave the restaurant industry and focus on Eason Branding full time, what fears or doubts did you have to overcome?
Oh, goodness. I had been with Joe Germanato for 9 years, and he almost became like my best bud. And I kind of felt like when I left, I was leaving him behind. And I thought when I told him he was gonna like blow up. He's like this really cool Italian guy, but like, family first. It's always been family first, and he does not do well when, people leave. And instead, he was like, you know what, kiddo, I'm really proud of you. Go out there, chase your dream. I know you're going to do big things. Just don't forget about me. And I think that alone was like what I needed to hear. And I think I spent so long fearing that when I left, like, I was going to just leave behind 9 years. And I haven't had that experience. My friends are still my friends. Joe and me still have a great relationship. And I think I hit a point where I had done all I could do. And I kind of came to a crossroads where I was like, I need to be doing more for my company. But you try to convince yourself that you could always be doing more and that you can do both things if you just schedule your time better or, wake up earlier. But like when you're getting home at 12 or 1 and going to bed at 2 or 3, you're not waking up at 6 a.m. Like, who are you kidding? And I think I finally hit that point where for a year I'd been telling myself I can do more if I just, structure my time better, am a better person. And after that year, nothing had happened, and I had tried everything. And so I said, I've got to choose one or the other. And I wanted to have a company for as long as I can remember. So it was, that way. And then I figured the best way to build the company was to move home, which was a huge change. I mean, I'm a New Yorker at this point. I mean, I grew up all over, but I have been in New York for 11 years. And some of the weirdest things here are, I'm like, what do you mean I can't like get dollar pizza? Or what do you mean like I can't order food at 4 a.m.? Like, luckily I don't have as many of that now as you get older and you're not drinking, but you're just used to always having so much stimulation in New York that I'm having to learn to slow down my life in Virginia, which is a good thing. It's giving me way more time to focus on my company, but it is a big change. I think I was scared of that a little bit too. Like, I think I was scared that like if I left New York, I would feel like I failed. And then I, had to say like, I made it in New York for 11 years, a lot longer than most people make it in New York. Like I haven't failed. I'm making the decision to move home. No one's making me. It's not like I failed and I'm moving home. Like I'm actively making the decision to work on my dream where I need to be. And I think that so I think the fear of failure, the fear of leaving behind and, totally jumping into your dream is all a little bit scary. And then leaving behind your home that you've known for 11 years is scary. But I think it's all, I've been here a few months now, and I think I'm now finally, all my stuff I got back from New York a few weeks ago, I unpacked all my storage, and I finally feel like I'm at home. But it took a while to like accept New York is not your home, but that doesn't mean that it's not going to be one day again. But for now, it's not.
Mm-hmm. And I love that you were hearing those fears and those doubts, and you really took the reins and created a more empowering story about how you've survived, you've thrived, you've lived in New York for 11 years. You're choosing to go home.
Yes, it was a hard narrative, but luckily I've had help rephrasing it, and now I actually believe that. I think I said it to myself a lot in the beginning, but I didn't really believe myself. But now I actually believe what I preach, and I think that makes all the difference, is when you are actively like, you know what, I'm not just saying this anymore, I truly believe it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that's true. That's where the power of creating those stories and saying it. So wonderful. Well, you clearly have perseverance and drive. So, what advice would you give to other creatives who are considering taking the leap to starting their own company or pursue a passion project alongside their day job?
I would say don't be scared to exit something just because it's comfortable. I had a very big talk with my friends I mentioned earlier, and I had said I kind of felt like I was on a hamster wheel, going round and round and round and round, and I could not get off. And I felt like that for about a year, but it was comfortable. I was making a steady paycheck. I was paying all my bills. I had all my friends. But then I sat down and I said, is that really what I want my life to be? Like, is this what I want it to be? And I really had, it was a hard question to sit with, but I think one thing I would just tell people is like, don't be scared to hop off that hamster wheel, even though it seems like the scariest thing at the time. And it is going to be uncomfortable for a few months. You're going to go back and forth if you made the right decision. But if you are following a dream or a passion, eventually you will know you made the right decision. But in the beginning, you are going to go back and forth of, should I have done that? This is not comfortable. I'm not making a steady paycheck every single week that I know is going to come every week. I left behind my life, but I think that you need to believe in yourself.
And to hear more stories to empower you to live your dream. I invite you to check out this video. You don't want to miss it. And if you want to hear about the latest podcasts that we post, be sure to hit subscribe. And know that you are worthy of living a life that you love. You can do it. I believe in you.